let's talk about some of the buyers and sellers at this year's trade deadline and some teams that we're looking at, who we think could potentially, you know, move the needle to help their season's cause, or even teams that might be potentially selling. So, Daniel.
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of teams, and I want to start off, with the sellers. And obviously, Malik, you can tell me to shut up whenever. The biggest team I think is the Las Vegas Raiders. I think the Raiders need to be sellers. I think the Raiders need to be in a position where the guys that you got on your squad, yes, you've got to build, but you're in a position where you're, in my opinion, I think this offseason is going to be a massive, massive change for this entire organization. So I'm looking at players. Obviously, Max Crosby is the big name, but even, some of these other guys, you go look at the wide receivers, a guy like Jacoby Myers, I think a lot of teams could use Jacoby Myers. I think Jacoby Myers is a stud. I think he's one of the most underrated wide receivers in the NFL, to where I think he could be a very good wide receiver too on a championship level team. And it sounds crazy to say, but I think Jacoby Myers could be of the mold of a Brandon Ayuk. And I don't think that's, when you look at his track record with a successful quarterback, even what he did last year with, the quarterback that they had in Aiden O'Connell, Jacoby Myers is very, very, very good. So I'd be looking at the Raiders saying, hey, this season isn't going to amount to a whole lot for you. Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell broke his thumb, so he's out a couple weeks. So you're rolling with Gardner Minshew. Your season's kind of up in air. You traded Devontae Adams. I think that it is important to keep a Max Crosby, but if you're in a position where, hey, we are selling everything, go out and see what you can get from Max Crosby. If you can go get 2 first-round picks from a championship contending team, go do it. A guy like Jacoby Myers, a guy like Jack Jones, these are the type of players. Hell, even a guy like Michael Mayer, right? Michael Mayer is a guy they drafted 2 years ago, and they just drafted Brock Bowers. So I would be looking at a Michael Mayer saying, hey, if you can go get a third-round pick for him, maybe go out and do it. So the Raiders are one team where they've got some decent talent. I would definitely be looking at them to be sellers. Another team that I think that definitely can be sellers, I think the Tennessee Titans should be sellers. The Tennessee Titans are a team that they are in a position where it's not looking good for them. And they head into the season, and we talked about this before the season, Malik, to where this team had high expectations. A lot of the fans were saying this is the dark horse team. Will Levis, dark horse MVP. This season hasn't turned out to be such, and the record isn't very good, and they've got a lot of pieces on defense that I think are absurd. I think that their defense line is one of the best in the NFL, if not a top 2 unit. So they've got guys like Jeffrey Simmons on a massive contract. You got wide receivers. You just traded away DeAndre Hopkins. You've got a Calvin Ridley. You just gave a massive contract to. Maybe go out and see what you can get for him. I like what they got with Tony Pollard, but you got a running back in Tajay Spears who is playing the backup role. He's playing the second fiddle. And I think Tajay Spears could be a very good running back on a championship contending team. So the Tennessee Titans are another team that I really think should be sellers at the deadline. And then when I look at a team that I think potentially, could be another seller, I think the Miami Dolphins could be sellers. It depends on what this whole Tua Tagovailoa situation is, but they're a team that I really think could be sellers because this season hasn't been too hot for them. And I think that the next 2 years with the contracts that they've given out with, looking at, hey, we have Jalen Ramsey. We have these defensive linemen. We have Tyreek Hill. Jalen Waddle's going to need his contract. Tua just got his contract. These dudes are making a lot of money. So I think that there is a world where the Miami Dolphins could be sellers. So those are 3 teams I think could be sellers. And then I can get to my buyers in a little bit.
I agree with you for the most part. I think the Raiders could be potential sellers here shortly. Um, I look at certain teams that came in with a lot of expectation. Obviously, the Browns are a team that
Mm.
everybody has kind of been paying attention to a little bit. It seems that they're willing to sell off some assets because things haven't been playing out the way that they're looking for. And Sean Brandon loves what you said about Tyreek Hill, bringing Tyreek Hill home. It'll be interesting, but I also think that if you are a team that has been marred with some injury and stuff like that, it might behoove you to hold on to some guys because
Mm.
there's always next year, and you hate to take on that mantra, but it's true. I wonder would the Jets be sellers at any point? Like, let's see
Ooh.
if things start to go a little south, will the Jets start selling off some assets if they start to feel that maybe that this um um if they start to feel like this team this season isn't panning out the way they're looking for. I know that there have been calls on Garrett Wilson Apparently, they have been um, neglecting them. But
Mhm.
it'll be interesting to see what takes place. Daniel, who were some of your buyers?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of teams. I'd be looking at, and this is a definitely a team that shouldn't necessarily be a buyer, but if Chris Godwin really is out for the year, I think that there's a world where the Buccaneers go and look for a wide receiver. And I think the reason why is, like we discussed on the show many times, this Buccaneers team is really on pace to be a championship contending team. Obviously, you go look at they got dog walked against the Baltimore Ravens, but I think that this team has the makings to really make some noise in the playoffs. To really make some noise, I think that they can push the Detroit Lions, they can push the Minnesota Vikings, they can push these teams. So I'd be looking to see, hey, they've obviously got Jalen McMillan, who I'm really high on as a wide receiver too now. But there's a world where I think, okay, you could go out and get a wide receiver. Another team that I think could be buyers, and I think should be, the Los Angeles Chargers. I think the Chargers are in a position where maybe that they're okay with how the season's gone. They're what 3-3, 3-4. Um, their receiving core leaves a ton to be desired. Their offense leaves a ton to be desired. And if the Chargers are a team where they really want to make some noise, I would go out and trade for a wide receiver. And hell, even if they don't feel like they're in championship contending mode right now, you could still go trade for a wide receiver to build for your next couple years. So I think that the Chargers are a team where they've got the makings to be something good, and they've got some very very talented. I love what their offensive line has done. They're no doubt in my mind a top 5 offensive line in the NFL. So I'd be looking at the Chargers as another team, and then maybe if anything else, I think the Steelers could obviously be buyers, and that looks at the wide receiver position. That looks at, hey, are they just content with the roster? Are they content with what they're doing? Their record is nice, but are they really, of the championship contending teams right now? And then if there's anybody else, I think the Lions are in a position, and this kind of goes with my sentiment. The buyers are the teams that are of the upper echelon that are really just looking to reach the Super Bowl. Hence, the Buffalo Bills traded for Mari Cooper. Hence, the Kansas City Chiefs traded for DeAndre Hopkins. This is the type of team that you look at and say, hey, that team could be buyers. Hell, the Green Bay Packers, in my opinion, should be buyers. They are a team where you've got Jordan Love for the next 5, 6, hopefully the next 10 plus years. But how often are you going to, be in a position where you say, hey, right now, I believe this team is a championship contending team. And I think that that's what teams really take for granted, Malik. I think that teams take for granted how good they are in certain moments and they let things pass them by. So a team like the Detroit Lions, there's a world where in 2 years that they fall off. But they're Ben Johnson, one of the best offense coordinators. He's looking to get a head coaching gig. So without Aiden Hutchinson, I'd be looking at the Detroit Lions as another team to where, hey, maybe you go out and get a pass rusher like a Jadeveon Clowney, like a Chase Young, like a Hassan Reddick. Maybe you go out and do that because if I'm the organization, and it's the same thing that we have this discussion with the Cincinnati Bengals, right? Hey, if your team is in the mode to win a championship and you can look at your team and say, hey, I believe we're going to compete with the best teams in the playoffs, and I believe we have a true shot of winning the championship, why the hell not go all in and give up a third round pick or give up a fourth round pick for a guy that you feel like could be a game changer? So that's what I believe. And the only issue I would say is there isn't a lot of game changers that are quote unquote on the trade market, but still, teams like the Lions, I think, could really go out, make a trade, and say, hey, we've got to go and try to capitalize and really try to win a Super Bowl this year.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, that's for sure. To see how this whole thing shakes out in terms of who will be buyers, who will be sellers. I'd like to see the Bengals be a little more active. Don't know if that's in their plans.